Let's talk about Putin, the president of Russia. Donald Trump has said nice things about Putin. You yourself said that Putin is a stronger leader in Russia than President Obama is here in the United States. You know, you've caused some heartburn among some of your fellow Republicans who have said some pretty tough things about Putin, like the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan. So explain exactly the Pence position and the Trump position on Putin, because it's caused a lot of concern and confusion out there, as if you're saying nice things about a guy who's taken over parts of Ukraine and done all sorts of, maybe even interfering in U.S. domestic politics.
Look, my record in denouncing Vladimir Putin is long and storied, whether it be his oppression of the press or his violence or his aggression in the region, and that's all been very clear. Look, when Donald Trump and I said that the small and bullying president of Russia was stronger on the world stage than President Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton in her tenure, that was not an endorsement of Vladimir Putin. That was an indictment of the weak and feckless leadership that President Obama and then Secretary Clinton have brought to the world stage. Look, America is stronger than Russia. The American political system is superior than the Russian political system in every way. We just simply need a president of the United States who will command the respect of the world and lead with American strength, and that'll be Donald Trump.
Because I just heard you say stuff about Putin. I never heard Donald Trump say about Putin. Are you on the same page with Donald Trump when it comes to brandishing Vladimir Putin as what you said, somebody who does awful things to his own people?
I think Donald Trump and I know what we're dealing with in Vladimir Putin. I mean, he's a former KGB agent. He has a strong authoritarian strain. He's repressed not only the media, but his own people, and suspected in violent acts. And of course, he's invaded Ukraine and Crimea. And but what you have in Donald Trump is someone who will take the world as it comes. What you hear him saying is that he's willing to engage foreign leaders. I mean, the very ceasefire that we are watching tenuously right now was brokered because the United States of America was willing to sit down with Russia. Give Secretary Kerry his credit for sitting down with his counterpart and saying to the Russians, you need to bring Assad to the table. We bring the insurgents to the table and work out a ceasefire so that humanitarian aid can flow. What you hear Donald Trump saying is not that we are turning a blind eye to the realities around Vladimir Putin, but it says that he is the president of that nation. We are going to deal with him, and we're going to deal with him in a forthright way to advance the interest of the United States of America. And as Donald often says, how about get Russia involved in finding a way for us once and for all to destroy ISIS at its source and make both of our nations safer?
Let's get to some domestic economic issues critically important to the American people. I know we don't have a lot of time, but Janet Yellen, the subject came up in Donald Trump's interview this morning on CNBC. He suggested that the Federal Reserve chair was keeping interest rates low for political reasons to help Hillary Clinton, in effect, get elected president of the United States. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think it's very questionable that we're continuing to keep interest rates low. It tends to create this artificial prosperity that shows up in the stock market and on Wall Street, but it's not hitting Main Street. And the reality is that for whatever the motivation at the Federal Reserve, there is this masking of some fundamental problems in the American economy that the American people are feeling each and every day. I really do believe that the millions of Americans who are rallying to this cause are rallying to the fact that you've got this clear-eyed businessman who looks at a 1% American economy and says that's not good enough.
So is she politicizing decisions of the Federal Reserve?
I'm not here to judge or to speculate, but there is simply no question that the unwillingness of the Federal Reserve to make any adjustment whatsoever has created a climate where frankly, the hedge fund managers and the stockbrokers do really well. The stock market stays inflated because essentially the free money on the marketplace.
Right.
And and the American people are struggling. We need a pro-growth plan, the likes of which Donald Trump has laid out, to lower marginal rates, to lower the business taxes, to roll back regulations, repeal Obamacare. That's what will get the economy moving
One
again.
final question before I let you go. The debates. I know you're preparing for your vice presidential debate against Tim Kaine. Donald Trump said something curious today. He said that maybe there shouldn't be any moderators in these presidential debates. He said because they could be rigged, very unfair. Earlier, he thought the moderators were all fair, the moderators that were chosen by the Presidential Debate Commission. What is it? Is he okay with the moderators? Is he going to go forward with the debates? I know you talked to him about this.
I talk to Donald Trump every day, sometimes twice a day. Look, I think he's looking forward to the debates. But the idea of just being on the stage, squaring off, really being able to talk about the future that Hillary Clinton offers with essentially a third Obama term, considering the same policies that have weakened America's place in the world, stifled our economy, and Donald Trump's plan to rebuild our military, stand strong on the world stage, get this economy moving again. I think more that we hear from these two candidates, the more confident I am that Donald Trump will be the next president of the United States.
And you're going to meet with members of Congress tomorrow. What's your message to them?
My message to them is that there's tremendous momentum in this campaign. We're seeing it not only in the national polls, but we're seeing it in key battleground states where we're either tied or slightly ahead. We're seeing great progress in our Senate races. We're seeing some real separation in some key Senate races. And my word to them is very, very simple. Donald Trump and I are committed to doing all that we can, not just to bring home a victory at the White House, but to make sure that we re-elect strong Republican majorities in the House and in the Senate, and we're going to partner with them every day between now and the election day to bring that about.
You going to meet with Ted Cruz?
I'm going to meet with a great number of members. I hope to have a chance to meet with Ted and Senator Mike Lee, my own Senator Dan Coates, but I'll be meeting with the Republican Conference and meeting with senators in their policy luncheon, and it's a great honor for me to come back. I got a whole lot more people walking around with me these days, but it'll be good to be back with a lot of good men and women that serve this country with great sincerity.
Governor, you've been very generous with your time. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you come back. Good luck out there on the campaign trail.
Thank you, Wolf.
Governor Mike Pence, the Republican vice presidential nominee.